Ashley Beharrylal, and in this video I'll be discussing the purpose of film and video editing and its role in the production process, explaining the roles of the editor and their relationship with others within the process, evaluate the techniques used in editing and how those techniques impact the audience. Well, let's start by defining editing. According to Desiree Sampson, lecturer at SBCS Media Campus, editing is making judgment calls. It's an intuitive process. You have to feel it. It is like visual poetry. It can startle, amuse, and shape an audience's emotions. The act of editing is the process of organizing, reviewing, selecting, and assembling the picture and sound footage captured during the production to tell a coherent and meaningful story. Editor Sally Menke, who started off studying psychology in college, fell in love with editing and prompted a career change.
I felt like I could study human behavior and actually have it affect people rather than, on a big screen rather than in a book, or which is all really important being in a book and a college professor, but I just wanted to do it in a kind of bigger scale. Be able to put two images together and create impact, was more fascinating to me than actually directing. So it was just so powerful, the tool. I cut a couple of documentaries when I was in college, and I realized that putting two abstract images together was just such a powerful tool, or expression, or literary.
Editors are responsible for understanding the technology of post-production, from editing software to integrating sound design, music, and special effects. For example, in Kill Bill, edited by Sally, the fight scene with Beatrix and Ellie has a lot of sound effects as well as some non-digestive sound. Like this part where there is this brief screeching where they actually sort of stand still, but that non-digestive screech is introduced to build tension during that pause in action, and as soon as the action resumes, it stops immediately. So not only does a cut impact the audience, but so too does the sound or no use of sound. Apart from that, they must also understand film, grammar, characters, and timing, where to cut, the effects those cuts would have on the viewer. Each cut has the ability to move an audience and can make or break a mood, like in Pulp Fiction for the dance sequence. The shots are held long and it focuses on Uma and John Travolta's characters. This pulls you into the performance. It's intimate in a sense and creates that sort of mood. If Sally were to cut away to save the audience, it would possibly break that intimacy. The editor's work is well done when no one notices. The process of editing involves creating an assembly cut when the footage first comes in. The assistant editor sorts through the footage and organizes the footage for the editor to assemble them, hence assembly cut. This gives a sense of the film for the director to see if they have captured the story. Next, a rough cut is done. This is where the film is reworked. Shots are eliminated or rearranged, and you start getting a sense of the movie's length. After solving whatever issues arise in the rough cut, tweaking can be done. The fine cut. You decide how to cut, how long to cut, the effect you want to achieve, and how to cut to achieve that. And finally, the final cut or locked cut. No changes are done here to order or duration of the film, but audio is added. Visual effects, etc. are also added. The editor works very closely with the director throughout this process. Since great editors and directors tend to collaborate a lot, for example, editor Michael Kahn worked a lot with director Steven Spielberg. The same goes for Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker, and director Quentin Tarantino and late Sally Menke.
Quentin walked over with a box of 50 films that he wanted me to watch, or maybe it was 30. Maybe I'm just exaggerating at this point, but 30 is a lot too. And and we start, once I know what his project is, he has a theater as well, and we start watching films, and not for any other reason, but just to get immersed in a culture, because his films tend to revolve around a genre. every time we do a film, it's kind of either his own style or, a World War II film that with his style superimposed on it, or, a Hong Kong or action film. So generally we start with Quentin. I start early on. Sometimes he brings me into his library, his music library, and plays music for me and says, this is when blah, blah, blah happens, or this is when blah, blah, blah happens. And then sometimes that ends up, most of the time that ends up being the music that he uses. Sometimes, we change it. But definitely I start on board full-time, first day of shooting. Quentin, and everybody is a little different in how they get their feet wet.
Yeah.
But, and by the time I had worked with Quentin, I had already done, I guess 3 or 4 features, I can't remember right now, but a lot of small films and many documentaries. I worked with Ken Burns, actually, on a film, and did a lot of PBS documentaries and things like that. So I had a lot of film experience under my belt. But Quentin, film is in every cell of his body, so that it was just exciting from day one. It was thrilling to hear him, express himself and talk about what he wants out of scenes. And it was, from the very first day we worked together, it was magic. It was just magic. He knew exactly what he wanted. He's an amazing filmmaker. It evolved into a completely kind of organically tacit understanding of his style, and he understands my style. And we also, of course, trust each other implicitly. But what's funny about that is that we kind of had that from the beginning. I mean, we got to know each other pretty quickly on Reservoir Dogs, and it's remained the same since then. And it's kind of interesting because we just bonded immediately, and that bond has remained to this day.
According to Walter Murch, who is considered one of the editing greats, when making a cut, you should consider 1, emotion. What effect does the cut have on the audience? What emotion does it evoke? What do you want them to feel, and does the cut achieve that? 2, story. Does the cut work with the story? Does it add to it? Cut should move the story along. Number 3, rhythm. Edits should have a rhythm or beat to it. The cut should be interesting. How does this affect the scene's pace? Number 4, eye trace. Where's the audience looking? Where should the audience be looking? This should be able to guide the audience through the scene. For 5 and 6, there's 2D space of the screen and 3D space. This is where following the 180-degree line and 180-degree rule comes into play. It's best to maintain characters' position on screen so you don't confuse the audience, or not to follow these rules to create an effect, something that Sally does quite often.
But sometimes you want to abstract those ideas. Like the idea of crossing the 180. I mean, generally you kind of want to be aware of that so people know where they are, but I cross it all the time for impact. So yes, there is something, a classical approach to editing that you have in the back of your head, but do I adhere to it strictly? Absolutely not.
Editing for genre. There are certain editing conventions and styles when it comes to genre editing. For example, when editing an action sequence, there should be a central character or characters that the audience would be rooting for. In all the crazy mayhem of the action sequence, this builds excitement and connects the audience to the character, making them care. Hence, it's important to cut back to the main character every few seconds. There must, of course, be some obstacle or struggle to make it interesting. And this should be clear. Clarity is also important. The audience must know what's going on. This might sound obvious, and it is, but In all the tension and the speed of the action, then making things confusing, crossing the line editing in lots of close-ups for blurry action can be tempting but confusing to the viewer. Action editing is usually very fast-paced, which is achieved by a lot of quick cuts in order to keep the story moving along. You would often have a lot of reaction shots to evoke some sort of emotional response from the viewer. Parallel cutting is often used in action sequences as well. This builds excitement and anticipation in the viewer. When it comes to cutting for suspense, quick cutting isn't as effective. To achieve suspense editing, it is best to hold shots longer by giving the character a few seconds more screen time. Allowing a shot to linger makes the audience more and more anxious, building to that big reveal. These long shots build anticipation for the upcoming event. Music works hand in hand with editing for suspense. A suspenseful track that matches the pace of the edit creates a deeper sense of anxiety in the viewer. No music can also affect the scene. A sudden stop in music can intensify anxiety or fear, as well as a sudden rise. It all depends on what works for the scene. Freeze frames also are used to create suspense. Reaction shots connect the audience to the character, so of course you want to have some reaction shots in there as well. Using tracking shots as the scene progresses feels more realistic for the audience, and using long takes can also be more engaging to the audience than straight cuts can. Effective editing can leave lasting effects on a viewer. For example, if someone watches a horror movie, they can easily get paranoid and jumpy after. That paranoia, fear, or suspenseful feeling can linger for a while.
Go back.
I know a few people who saw It, for example, and now they fear clowns. Kids who watch action movies with a lot of stunts often try to mimic them after. The excitement they built up from watching action sequences with all the quick cuts and fast-paced action can influence them to attempt stuff like that. When I was younger, my brother and I would often play fight trying to reenact those stunts. It seemed so cool. In school, my friends and I did Star Wars fight scenes for our drama classes with toy lightsabers based on what we saw in the movie Star Wars. Immediately, you don't think about the editor, it doesn't occur to you, but everything felt so natural and everything flowed seamlessly. And only now that I'm doing this, I know that had that influence because of the magic the editor worked. My name is Beharrylal. Thank you for watching this editing presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.